Hello there, and welcome to the jobs.ac.uk Operations and Management Professional Services webinar. My name is Colette Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Marketing at UCL, and I'm going to be hosting this session with you. This is set up for operations and management staff who are considering a career at a university, and what we hope to do is give you an idea of what it's like working in a management role in higher education. So my career started in Unilever and I was there for about 10 years and then got the public sector bug. And I went from there to the BBC, into government, then the Skills Council, till I found my way to higher education and worked at King's College London, and from there to UCL. At UCL, I look after all the communications, marketing and student recruitment, which in commercial terms would be marketing, comms, trade marketing and business development. And I just love it. So I want to introduce the other members of the panel to you, and then we will deal with some questions. Rachel, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thanks. I'm Rachel Brealey. I'm Director of Faculty Operations for Science and Engineering at the University of Manchester. I've worked in AT throughout my career, and in my current role I lead and manage a multidisciplinary team of just over 850 professional staff across the faculty. That covers teaching and learning, research, operations, technical support, HR, finance, comms, pretty much everything. And I work closely with the Dean in terms of developing and implementing faculty strategy.
Fantastic, thank you. Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Charlton. I'm Associate Director of Public Engagement at De Montfort University. I've worked in higher education for about 10 years now, and my current role, I look after the majority of public-facing work the university is undertaking, and that tends to adapt with the times. So currently I'm doing lots of work around connecting teaching and research to the recovery of the pandemic. I'm sure you've seen or heard that we've been hit quite hard here in Leicester with different things. So that's how my days have been filled. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark. And Paul.
Thanks, Colette. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Marshall. I'm Director of Strategy Planning and Performance at City University in London. The role is a broad one, covering annual business cycle, strategy development and implementation, risk management, management information, and so on. My career has been pretty much wholly within that kind of space within higher education. Although I did start out doing student recruitment and have done a stint managing one of the business units at the University of Leeds. So it's been a fascinating journey to date, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it continues. So thank you.
Fantastic. So we've got a terrific panel with lots of experience around the place to help answer some of your questions. If you're watching live today and you want to ask us a question, please use the chat box on the side of the YouTube screen to ask your question. You'll only be able to do this if you're signed in on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, you can tweet us at jobs.ac.uk and using the hashtag #JobsQ. So we have had a few questions already sent in, so we're going to start with those first of all. So the first question which came in was, how can I make the leap from a management role in industry into higher education management? What are the key qualifications, skills and experience needed? So I'm going to have a little go at that one before I open it out to the panel. And I'm going to give a little bit of a boring answer and say it's about transferable skills. You know, I've worked across a number of sectors, and the thing that stands out is how transferable our skills in professional services are. My advice would be, when you are talking to people in higher education, depending what industry you've come from, if it is FMCG, they don't really relate to those examples. So it's much better to use examples to illustrate your skills, which are sectors they can relate to. So I often found using examples from the BBC helped explain the skills that I could bring into the industry, rather than necessarily using it from my days working on Bachelor's Cuppa Soup. I would say the other thing is just fundamentally don't come into the sector unless you have a profound respect for higher education and what academics do. They are a very rightly proud sector, and I've come across people who've wanted to come in who think, oh, we can teach them a thing or two, and that just isn't true. There's a very strong culture, a very strong work ethos, and I think that you just need to think about understanding the vibe and the language that's being used. And we may come back to this at the end, but I've found that compared to the commercial world, some of the concepts they use, particularly in marketing, are used in a different way in higher education. So when they say marketing in the commercial context, that is actually business development. So you just need to talk to a few people, understand what is meant, but I would say overall, your transferable skills from different industries would really help add to the discussion and the development of the sector. But I'm going to open that up to see if any other members of the panel would like to come in on that. And yeah, I'm just thinking, sorry, I'm not quite sure if any of them would like to add anything to that there. Yeah, Rachel, thank you.
I haven't worked in the private sector, but I'd absolutely echo what you've said, Colette. I think it's about looking at those transferable skills and gaining an understanding of HE. I think if I was kind of critical of the way that we tend to recruit, perhaps more historically than now, it's been that we've talked about needing to have experience in HE, and actually I don't think that's true, and we are changing certainly a lot of our role descriptors and adverts and so on to reflect the fact that people coming in from different areas of work are really building the richness, I think, of our workforce. But I think you're right in saying it is a sector that everyone who works in really is very proud of, and therefore it's about how you can bring those skills to bear in supporting the kind of work that we do.
Fabulous. So let's move on to the next question, which has come in, which says, what are the main benefits of working in higher education compared to other sectors? For example, the relationship with academics and students. Is your role rewarding and meaningful? And if so, why? So, I mean, I alluded to this. I just think that the academics and their research that we work with is phenomenal. And it is the only sector I've worked in where people talk about doing the right thing for humanity and no one sniggers, because everyone does actually mean it. So I always get a buzz out of that and working with super clever people. But let me open that up to the panel, because I know you all have some great examples of the benefit and what you get out of working in the sector. So Mark, can I bring you in there?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to add to the transferable skills. When I moved from private industry into higher education, I was made redundant from my previous job 10 years ago. So I had to take a look at myself to what I could do. And I've always been passionate about higher education, but I didn't really think I had the skills that could transfer. So there's a good piece of work that people can do in reflecting on what you're good at and what skills you have, and really that's links to this current question, in that I've been able to take lots of my skills into this new role. And my previous role, I used to be a journalist and a newsroom manager at the Leicester Mercury newspaper in Leicester, and then I transferred into a management role. So I took those skills with me. And a newsroom's quite an exciting environment, and also it's comparable to a university in that there are lots of interesting things, newsworthy things happening all the time. So one of the most rewarding things about working at a university is this constant richness of activity that people are doing. On top of that, seeing young people progress is really an exciting part of the work. And also something you mentioned, Colette, about different types of research that are going on. I think you can feel everyone in the university can feel some ownership to some of the powerful research impacts that come forward. So from my perspective, that's been a rewarding element. It's also transferring from private to higher education. The university invested in my career development, and that I'm not sure I would have got that in private industry. So I'm currently studying for a PhD at the moment, which has been funded by the university, and looking directly at my field. So it feels like we've both got skin in the game on that. And I don't think that would have been something that my previous employer would have considered for a moment. So there's lots of good career development opportunities. I don't know.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Paul, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Colette. I mean, I'd agree with everything that Mark's just said. For me, the major benefit of working in higher education is the transformational impact that higher education has on young people and people from all walks of life, actually. And I think certainly in the time that I've spent at De Montfort, at Nottingham Trent, and now at City, seeing students who are first in their family to go to university, coming out, seeing the pride in their families' faces at graduation, and seeing the pride in their faces as they cross that stage, is just an incredible feeling to think you played a small part in that journey. And certainly the work that I do, isn't student facing, but I still like to think that myself and the team have that impact. I guess the second thing for me, and the second benefit, is echoing Mark's point about how interesting it is. I think higher education is the only sector where in the morning you could be going to a fashion show, looking at some incredible work undertaken by third-year students, and all that entails, and in the afternoon meeting colleagues who are working out how owls can be used to find water leaks. Which is a real thing, and you get everything in between, and it's an incredible sort of environment to work in, very vibrant, very lively, and as I say, it's just fascinating to see just exactly what the minds and the great minds of the UK are working on right now.
That's brilliant, and I agree with you. It's a real privilege sometimes when you're spending time with these academics. Rachel, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I mean, much the same. I think the excitement and pride that people have in their work across research and teaching, I think is really inspiring. You see some things that are truly able to change lives and improve society happening, and that's really something that I think everyone across the community can feel proud of. I think the fact that we work in really truly international communities, we have academics and students joining us from across the world who bring all sorts of different things with them in terms of experience and culture, and it really is sort of a community feel on our campuses, where people come together and create something greater than the sum of the parts, I think, which is really great to see. I really enjoy working in partnership with academic staff. We work very closely together, being able to sort of challenge ourselves about how we improve student experience and teaching. I'd agree with Paul's comment about the students who are the first in their families to come into higher education, seeing how that transforms their lives. And I think also the fact that we largely recruit a young population, and so you have to change, you have to adapt, you have to understand social media and different ways of working around that community. So you're pushed each year really to adapt to what a young generation is looking at, and I think that's a real benefit of the sector.
So the next question we have is, what are the standout development opportunities you've had in higher education? For example, training, projects, conferences, support, and how has this benefited to you? So I'm going to open it up, and maybe over to you, Rachel, to start this one.
Sure. So in terms of sort of training and development, a couple of years ago I did an Aspiring Registrars programme, which gave me an opportunity to connect to counterparts at other higher education organisations, which has been a great opportunity around being able to just learn and compare, share ideas and so on. I found that really helpful in terms of my personal development. In terms of projects, I've been lucky to work on some really exciting projects. My current one is a a £420 million capital project, a new engineering campus for the university, and just the scale and scope of that project in terms of the opportunity that provides for Manchester across students and research was just something that was really, really different to anything I'd ever worked on. Big strategic project, opportunity to work in partnership with both academic colleagues and external consultants, and we also took the opportunity to go and look at exemplars in terms of both private companies and other HEIs to see what really was the leading elements we could bring in from in and outside the sector.
That's a fantastic example, although there was a moment where I heard how big the budget was and it was in a learning question, but of course that is how you learn and grow, isn't it? Mark, can I bring you in now?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say mine's nothing as grand as Rachel's example, but it's quite a fundamental thing for me. When I started at De Montfort University, Paul was there at the time actually, so probably saw this. I was well, there's no firm evidence that I've improved any, but I was the worst presenter in conferences and to.
We'll let Paul come back on in a minute. Keep going.
So I had literally, I find myself coming from a job where I never had to present anything to regular updates to executive board, stakeholder updates, speaking to student staff and so on. Getting my head around PowerPoints and this kind of stuff. And eventually I went to my line manager and said, I can't present things. This public speaking, I just can't do it. And then from that, with the my career development was I got public speaking training, and I went from dreading public speaking to actually really wanting to jump in and have my say and present things. And that, like, from a personal perspective, that's been really transformative for me, because you know, it was akin to the movie the King's Speech. But when I started out, I was pretty poor, and then suddenly it had this transformative effect, not overnight, but just in terms of developing my confidence over time to take it forward.
Well, what a fantastic example, and what a living case study you are, because, well, we'll let Paul come in a minute, but, you know, the fact that you're doing this webinar in itself says that you took the opportunity and have absolutely conquered that. So that's brilliant. Paul, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Colette. I mean, firstly, Mark's always been extremely eloquent, and ever since I've known him, he's always been able to sort of hold an audience. So I'm not quite sure where sort of the lack of confidence came from, but he's always been excellent. For me, I mean, the opportunities have come through a variety of different forums. The professional associations in higher education are excellent. The Association of University Administrators is tremendous at supporting colleagues, particularly in their early career, getting that breadth of experience, and bringing colleagues together from a wide variety of different professions within higher education space. My own sort of professional body, the Higher Education Strategic Planners Association, does much the same thing, and there are university bodies that provide that support, conferences, training, development, which is really helpful for networking outside of universities. And I guess that the universities in themselves are very supportive places, and higher education is a very supportive environment. So there's always the networking opportunities, there's always the opportunities to go and meet colleagues from universities down the road or across the country and share good ideas and and various things that can happen there. There's the in-job training side of things. I mean, when I started out in schools liaison, right at the start of my career, I had a very similar experience to Mark, to be honest. There's no way I would have stood up in front of 10 people, let alone the 150 that I had to deliver sort of talks on higher education to. And to come and do this, if you sort of said to me 20 years ago that this would be something I'd be doing in whatever forum, I would have sort of panicked and run away. So there's that sort of there's that inbuilt sort of confidence building and sort of personal journey. I guess for me, the main sort of development came through sort of trust from managers and previous bosses. So within 6 months of completing the Managing Successful Programs practitioner course, my boss at DNU decided that he wanted me to become sort of the program director for the university's transformational program, the implementation of SAP, which was ridiculous in many ways, but tremendous fun, and an incredible learning experience, and something I'll never forget. So higher education is about development and opportunities, and if you want to develop yourself, then it's probably the best sector to do it in.
Fantastic. They were a really great set of answers, and I think what hopefully people can hear from that is the theme that there's a lot of on-the-job training, that you may get put on big projects that stretch you beyond certainly what I felt in the commercial world you might be trusted with, because you're professional services and they expect you just to take it on. So there are real opportunities for growth here. The standout experience I've had in higher education is I was at King's. I was part of a pan-European group called Humane, and I got to go to their winter school, and it was just fantastic. There were people from across the UK and across Europe who worked in excuse me, professional services, and we did case studies across a week and had different speakers coming in and talking. And I would, in all honesty, put that management experience up there with anything I did in Unilever. It was so exciting to talk to people who were in different jurisdictions, different size universities, about the similar problems and compare and contrast. That really, I would say, that was the standout for me. So I think for people listening on the webinar today, even if you're coming into the sector and it's all about the students or all about the academics, there are plenty of opportunities for growth for you. And I think, as the panel's demonstrated, they come both on the job, but also sometimes if you can get onto a course. So Rachel, we have a question that's come in for you. What might an operations role look like outside of higher education, and what transferable skills are needed for an operations role in higher education?
Okay, I mean, I think the term operations is really used quite differentially outside of HE. Manufacturing industries use it very differently, I think, to other perhaps bigger corporate organisations. I think overall, I think it's probably most closely aligned to a chief operating officer or something similar. We work in partnership with the deans, who I guess are sort of CEOs of the faculties in that sense. So I think in terms of the range and scope of things that the role covers, it would be a kind of general manager, chief operations sort of role. In terms of the skills, I think you have to be a very good communicator. A lot of it is about leadership, about setting a tone, setting a culture, able to make decisions under pressure, able to take people on a journey with you in terms of setting strategy and then leading and managing a very multidisciplinary team to implement that strategy. As recent events have shown us, you need to be able to deal with major incidents as they occur, and deal with sort of anything that's thrown at you. I mean, I think the one thing I really like about my role is that no day is ever the same. You deal with whatever comes in. You try and have a plan for the week, and at times that gets thrown out the window, and you deal with whatever lands on your desk as the most urgent thing to deal with. I think a level of financial astuteness is key, and I guess it goes without saying a good understanding of HR processes and frameworks. Managing and leading staff is inevitably a large part of the role, given the scale of what you tend to run in terms of operations. Going back to the partnership with academics, I think being able to negotiate and influence is a really important skill. For many of our academic colleagues, they are very, very focused on what they want to achieve. And so you know, changing the way a service is offered or moving something online can feel like a real distraction to them, but it might be good for the organisation. And so I think that ability to influence and help shape and move things along is really important. And I think probably the biggest skill I've gained is to be able to compromise, because when people have such differing drivers in terms of what they want to achieve from their day, I think it comes down a lot to being able to find a compromise and a way forward that suits everyone and keeps that sense of a community wanting to move forward. Most people working in the universities really do want to progress and do the best they can in that area, and it's about finding a good working relationship with people.
That's a terrific answer, because as you were talking, I was thinking, you're exactly right. It is like running a small business with the academic as the intellectual or the visionary leader, but absolutely to your point about negotiating and influence, and something that I often say to colleagues from the commercial world who want to come in to universities, say you will have influence, you won't have power. So you can't snap your fingers and make something happen, but what you do is you negotiate and find compromises with these incredible academics, and what you end up with is usually an even better solution. So terrific. Question that's come in through for Mark and then Paul is, what are the steps in developing a career in higher education, operations and management for a recent graduate? What advice would you give them? Could we go to Mark first?
So I think, well, it's a great question, and it's going to be a very vibrant marketplace for graduates looking for jobs in the next couple of years, I would imagine. So higher education would be a good place to look, I think, if you're looking to go into a graduate position and perhaps develop your managerial skills. The best way to really get on the ladder, as it were, is to develop your skill set and in advance. So if you're at university at the moment, take up the opportunities that the careers departments are offering at the moment around internships and volunteering activities. Also, broaden your network. So start emailing Rachel, Colette and Paul straight after this webinar and start developing your networks. I think that's a very important thing, because if you can open up a dialogue with somebody who actually works in the environment, then you tend to get to know the terminology and the types of activities that are going on. And also, if you do develop good relationships, they will likely inform you of when vacancies come available. So I think it's going to be a challenging marketplace for graduates looking for employment in the next few years. But also, I mean, from my point of view, the De Montfort University is currently recruiting. It's continued to recruit throughout the pandemic, and like other universities, we're providing the services we always provided, perhaps a little differently and with new challenges. But I think there's a good opportunity. It would be a good career path to take right now to look at a management role in a university. But I think that fundamentally, develop your skill set and try and develop a network, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. That's a really great answer. Paul, can I bring you in to agree or to add some things to that?
Of course, yeah, thanks, Colette. I mean, I'd agree with everything that Mark's just said. And I think that there are some universities that have graduate development programs. So Nottingham Trent, for example, runs one for primarily its graduates, same with Birmingham. And they're really good ways of spending 2 years doing sort of 3, 4, 5 different things and getting experience across the higher education higher education professional services, and being able to develop that skill set and develop sort of an understanding of what the opportunities are, because from the outside they don't necessarily sort of appear to be the same as if you're on the inside. So I'd certainly think about looking at those. The Association of Heads of University Administration also run a graduate development programme in conjunction with Advanced HE, and that's a nationwide scheme that again sort of sets you up really well for a career in higher education operations management. I mean, as somebody who was a graduate and fell straight into university administration, I think my advice would primarily be find a job that you're interested in and find something that appeals. Don't necessarily find something you think is going to lead you into a career. So I started out as a schools liaison assistant and then progressed into academic and strategic planning, primarily because I wasn't very good at running events. And however, I was reasonably good at running, doing spreadsheets and numbers. And so that was spotted and I was put into a different role, and then that enabled my career to progress. So I think managers tend to be looking for sort of bright graduates, bright people who they can nurture, who they can then sort of develop, who they can then kick on into other roles. But inevitably, given the scope of higher education, you'll find that there are opportunities that sit outside of your immediate role. So whatever role you end up taking, you can then branch out into other projects, develop into other areas, and staying as broad as possible for as long as possible, for me, was really the key, and then using the opportunity as you get more senior to then specialise. So I think that's I think sort of where I would go. But as I say, it is about finding a role that you're interested in, and one that looks exciting, looks like you might want to do it, rather than just finding something that you think might get you to somewhere else. But in terms of the process, absolutely everything that Mark said.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. And Rachel, just maybe a couple of quick thoughts, because we've got some new questions that have come in, but please give us your ideas here.
I'd support what Paul said. I mean, like Paul, I went straight into HE as a graduate, although having been president of the Students' Union, not intending to stay in the sector. But I think certainly find something as an entry-level role or an internship. And I think then the important thing is to be agile and work across different areas of the organisation. There's lots of different streams that you can gain experience in, and I think that's a really good way of gaining experience and understanding, and then having a profile that can help you move into more of a management tier.
Thank you. And from my point of view, not to repeat the advice I always give recent graduates, because working in a university, you often are lucky in that they come and work with you, is yes, the networking, yes, take advantage of every opportunity, but also look at the people who are a few years ahead of you, or even 5-10 years ahead of you, and look at how they deal with issues and think about whether you want to do that, or when you get to that position, you're not going to do it, is the other piece of advice I give you. So you're learning the whole time, and just take advantage. It's a wonderful sector if you can get into it. Now, I want to turn to another question that's just come in, and the question is, could I ask the panel to comment on any policies within their institutions and directorates to address diversity in specifically the professional service staff? And I'll just give you a little flavour from UCL and then open it up to the panel. So the diversity is something which obviously universities generally care about, and UCL, it is particularly important because it's very tied with our founding ethos from Jeremy Bentham. We have a Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Office, EDI, which actually reports directly into our provost, because he wanted to make sure that they regularly reported to him, he could look at policies and could review progress. And that is for academic promotions, but also professional services. And within professional services, we are constantly having unconscious bias training, different forms of training which are in our policy framework, and tracking that. But I would say that the aspect that I feel is true in higher education, certainly at UCL, and very keen to hear from other panelists, is the hearts and minds. People really do care about it, and they want to get it right. And so if you are from a background that means that you've got you're one of the protected characteristics, or other aspects of diversity, I think you will feel more at home in the sector as a whole, because people do generally care about diversity. So yes, we have lots of policies in place, and I've given you a feel for what's going on within UCL, but I think the hearts and minds piece is also there. I have yet to meet a colleague for whom this isn't a big issue and who doesn't think about it. But I'm just going to pause there to see if anyone else from the panel would like to come in on this one. Yeah, Rachel, thank you very much. How's it work in Manchester then?
Very similar, I think, to what you've suggested, Colette. It's we again have EDI committees. We work actively in terms of recruitment and recruitment retention and promotion, in terms of trying to ensure that everyone is equally able to get advantages there. I think two of the things that we've done that I think are helping with promoting that inclusivity. We have a very successful technical apprentice programme, which is really helping to improve the diversity of our technical staff, bringing in also a lot of young people from our local areas who wouldn't normally think about coming into HE. So that's been amazing to see, and we're seeing those people really thrive and progress well within the organisation. And the other thing is through our graduate intern programme. So we do have a diverse student body, and our graduate interns come with us, spend a year with us as an intern, but then often do again remain within professional services. And so both of those, I think, have been key pillars of improving our EDI.
That's terrific. Paul, can I bring you in on this as well?
Yeah, thanks, Colette. I think it's fair to say that, like most sectors within kind of UK PLC, diversity is a massive challenge for us. As a sector, I think we've got something like 2% of black female professors. We have significant underrepresentation at senior levels. You just have to look at this panel to see that we tend to be white, middle class people with balance gender-wise, but in terms of sort of ethnic background and so on, there is a real challenge in universities to try and promote that. And I think part of what I think jobs.ac.uk are trying to do is to try and widen that funnel, if you like, and widen that diversity in order to sort of promote up through into sort of more senior positions. In terms of what we're trying to do at City, we've got things like BAME mentoring schemes, where senior members of the university, the executive committee, are mentoring BAME members of staff at more junior levels and providing that direct support. The executive committee have just started a detailed dialogue with our network for racial justice on some of the things that we can do in terms of removing the barriers to the diversity of our staff body, both within professional services and academically as well. And that's a really exciting piece of work, because for the first time we're actually having a dialogue and understanding what some of those challenges are and how we can best respond to them, which we haven't necessarily done up until now. And I think it's necessary, not least because at City, in the same as it is other universities, our staff body and the makeup of our staff body is very different from the makeup of our student body, where we have 80% of students coming from wide participation backgrounds. About 70% of our students come from BAME and so on. So we've got this real sort of challenge to be able to resolve this. But I am starting to see across the sector much more of an acceleration of really positive policies being put in place and positive actions being put in place to support both the career development and the recruitment of staff, both across the range of protected characteristics, but also sort of from socioeconomic background and so on. So it's an exciting place to be from that perspective.
Thank you, Paul. It sounds like a very comprehensive programme that you've got going on there that's obviously going to make a real difference. Mark, can I bring you in now on this one?
Yeah, I'll just keep this quite brief, really, but because I think Paul and Rachel really answered this question really well. I just want to say, sector-wide, I think we work in very diverse organisations, but it's a constant challenge to improve and to develop. And I would say to the viewers today that this is a sector that takes it really seriously, and the diversity of our staff really enriches it's one of the things that is really enjoyable about working at a university and makes it such a vibrant place to work. But we are constantly working hard to keep that diversity and develop it and include as many different people as we can. So I think there's a real drive in the sector constantly to develop this area. So.
Thank you. Sorry. That's absolutely right. I think if anyone's listening, and as I say, they are concerned about the sector's attitude to diversity, hopefully these answers have put your minds at rest. There are a lot of policies, a lot of initiatives, and overwhelmingly there's a really great desire to bring in people from more diverse backgrounds to add to the university. So I've been sent in a question, which I'm going to read and answer myself now. So someone has asked me, what are the benefits of working in a marketing department role in higher education, and how involved am I in the creative aspects of marketing at a senior level? So you know, I would say the benefit of working in marketing role and in Unilever, which is fast moving consumer goods. So I did work on Flora, Bachelors, Elmley, all the, Mushy Peas, all that kind of stuff. One of the things I love about higher education is, why are we doing it? We're helping students achieve their potential or their life goals. We're helping academics achieve the next breakthrough. And everyone is okay with we're doing things because that's the right thing to do, and that is not to cast aspersions on other sectors. It's just, it is front and central. The benefit of helping others achieve their goals is, for me, very motivating. In terms of the marketing and creativity, I would say certainly the way I run it in UCL is we are doing it in a way that would bear scrutiny in the commercial world. I deliberately have recruited people from across higher education sector, so not just the Russell Group, the more recruitery university end, but also people from outside the sector. So that's the charity industry, other not-for-profits, but also the commercial world and agencies, because I quite like that creative mix. And in terms of the creative process, it is, as you would find in a commercial organisation, we write creative briefs. I always want to read them, talk to the team and approve them. And often I'll get involved in the first stage of creative concepts and then step back. And that is how it worked in Unilever. So obviously I'm not involved in every aspect, but I believe that our marketing, our campaigns, how we project ourselves is very important. And you know, we've had a fantastic year, which we may have time for me to come to at the end, but that is because we bring together people from a range of different backgrounds. We're all passionate about doing fantastic work. We aren't passionate about just being the best in UCL or in higher education. We want to produce the best marketing there is, and therefore I would see fewer differences between how I would have run things at the BBC or in Unilever to how I'm running them in UCL today. So as I say, always happy. I think at the end, if other questions come in, we can talk about that separately. But in marketing roles, I think you could have a very exciting role in the industry. It is about selling benefits. It's about selling academic breakthroughs, opportunities to young people. So that's wonderful. And you can work to very high professional standards. This one is very topical. What are the main ways in which the coronavirus pandemic has changed your roles? So I'm sure everyone on the call is having that moment thinking, gosh, where do I begin? And I'll just give it a 2-second answer while the panel gather their thoughts. I would say it has changed things quite quickly in a sector which can move at its own pace. So to give you a flavour, for the first 4 months, I had an 8 a.m. meeting with our provost and senior leadership team every single day, including weekends, because issues kept coming up. It was an unprecedented situation. We thought we sorted one thing out, then something else had come out, or a rumour had got out. We needed to make decisions at pace. So it was full challenging, but I would say the last 2 months, it's settled down to a more normal pace. So most of the daily meetings are only midweek now. The benefit has really been that some of the silo mentality that may have existed before has melted away. We have just had to work together. We've worked very closely, we've worked very efficiently. I think to an extent, many of us across professional services and the academic community are slightly surprised how well we've worked together. But those new working relationships that I think a bit of mutual respect has really come through. So I'm very optimistic about how we might take it forward if we have to live with this long term or short term. I think for us in UCL, it has been very intensive. And not everything is done. There's still new challenges ahead, but we are actually getting into an even more positive way of working. So I'm going to open that up to the panel and see who'd like to come in. Maybe Rachel, I can flip it over to you because I know that you're in the eye of the storm on this one on some issues anyway.
Yes, so Manchester obviously is kind of back into major incident mode really at the moment, given infection rates across the city. It's similar really, Colette, to you. I think I've been really impressed with how teams have come together. There's been much more agility, I think, across different areas than perhaps we might traditionally see. And the pace of change, of having to close a large research facility within a week was something that we've never had to do before. And so we've learned a great deal, I think, about what we need to do to plan to be more ready for major change in the future. And I think the benefit I've seen is that I think it's gained people's confidence that we can do it. I think rather than that question of, oh, well, can we? Have we got the right skills? We've proven we can do it. And I think the confidence I've seen of senior leadership team, but then throughout the organisation of people feeling that they are able to work differently, to contribute differently, step outside of their comfort zone has been something that's really, really interesting to see. On a personal basis, I guess I've been far more involved perhaps in the day-to-day running than I would normally be because of things being in more crisis mode. But that's been really quite interesting for me as well in terms of just working around how we might embed a change in culture and ways of working longer term rather than dropping back to how we were working previously. And I think getting a bit more involved through that period has given me some real insights into where those opportunities are and just the range of talent and opportunity that we have to really keep that going in the future. So it's been a very challenging 6 months. I'm not feeling in Manchester we're quite out of the woods yet, but I think there's been some real benefits that we will want to try and embed as we move forward.
That's great. And I think when I talk to colleagues outside, I sometimes say it's like one of those endurance games, isn't it? You think you've conquered one thing and then something that you weren't expecting comes around the corner. So I'm going to turn now to Paul. Paul, can I bring you in on this?
Yeah, thanks, Colette. So I think for me, there are a couple of things. First of all, I think just my role has become broader, and the things I've been able to get involved in has really sort of amplified over the course of the pandemic and over the sort of 6 months. And I think that's been really welcome. And echoing Rachel's point about being able to move out of silos and being able to work across different teams, support different teams actually, whether that be in terms of the return to campus planning, whether that be in terms of sort of doing some sort of proper risk management around what the financial forecasts are looking like, or helping out in other ways. And I think it is very much that, it's all hands to the pump and being able to help out, and that's been really rewarding. The second thing for me is actually seeing that change in working practices. The shift to online broke down what I think are some fairly traditional leadership and management practices within the sector that largely sits around leaders being present and walking the floor and needing to be on site. And very quickly as senior leaders, we had to adapt to managing our teams online, not being in the office, not seeing them face to face, having to probably trust them more, empower them more, and that's been both incredibly rewarding. But it's something that I think some colleagues have really struggled with, because some colleagues, I guess, have been more traditional in their outlook about how you manage and lead teams and needing to be there, and perhaps previously not seeing the working from home or the flexible working as being something that's entirely beneficial to the health of the team or the organisation. And I think for me that's now shifted significantly. and now we're starting to see, much more in terms of that work-life balance coming to the fore, the need to maintain that, the way that we can really have that flexible working for the good of colleagues as well as for the good of the organisation, and being able to reduce space costs and so on. So it's been a fascinating journey, but yeah, those two things, I think, the breadth and the change in the way that leaders are leading and managing, I think is really coming to the fore.
Fantastic, thank you. Such an interesting answer, and as you say, I think listening across our different institutions, very similar themes, that the pandemic has really called everything into question, and if you're very focused, there are opportunities to move forwards. Mark, can I bring you in on this?
Sure. From my perspective, so my job title is Associate Director of Public Engagement, so I tend to, prior to the pandemic, we're bringing lots of people together. So fundamentally, I can't do that anymore in the traditional sense. And so my role has really transformed. It's unrecognizable now to what it was prior to the pandemic, and how we're working. Even because Rachel and Paul gave such great examples, I wanted to mention something different. I was responsible for a lot of international relationships from the university, and that would see me every couple of months or so, perhaps spending some time at a partner university overseas. So obviously that's completely stopped. But what I've noticed is we're getting so much more done online. I can speak to a Japanese university at 2 a.m, or I can, rather than have to fly to Tokyo and spend the week there just to get a meeting with the director of international, So there are some positives to this in terms of getting things done. Even and I'm sure colleagues on the call will agree, we're not being constantly called to meetings in London so that we could all get around the same table. We're doing equally as good work in this context. So I'm hoping that some of these things will stay. And fundamentally, my job connects to supporting teaching and learning, and all teaching and learning has changed, and most people working in a professional role in the university is supporting the wider function of the university in some way. So all of these jobs are changing, and they're having to, and I think you've all expressed the headaches of another problem comes along. Just when you think you've solved one, the next one arrives. That's pretty much how it is now. That's this is the future way of working, I think, is one of trying to establish some sense of normality while dealing with these huge crises as they come and go.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, you've summed it up very well. I have to say, I do miss not being on the campus. I'd spend a lot of my time walking between meetings, bumping into colleagues, having a quick chat and a coffee. But then on the other hand, our new provost from January is in Sydney, and I could have a call with him in Sydney and then an hour later talk to an agency we're working to in North America, which in the old world we might have thought, well, are you going to make a trip or not? As we're all working so effectively online. Okay, we've got one more question that I'd quite like to get into briefly, so I'll ask for slightly shorter answers and then we can wrap up. So the question that's come in is, having reached a mid-management level role, how would you advise moving between different directorates or functions within the HE sphere? How open are you to recruiting from a different function? So I'm assuming that's not from one faculty to another, but someone maybe from HR into comms. And I would say, from UCL, from my point of view, very open. You've got to have the aptitude, but I love people with different points of view. So if you show me that you're committed and you're interested in learning more and you can bring in something new, I'm up for it. Mark, I'm going to flip that one to you. Give us a quick answer so we can all have a chance at this one.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the transferable skills thing again, that I think if a lot of the mid-management functions are transferable, and actually bringing people with different perspectives of how different operations work in the university can only benefit your team. So I think that would be a logical approach. It would be my pithy answer.
Brilliant. So that's a yes from you, yes from me, yes from you, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely. Transferable skills, definitely. So in terms of my operations team at the next layer, I've had a head of HR, head of technical services, head of research come into those roles before, moving across areas. I think it's all about capability and confidence, I think, about managing and leading something that isn't your direct sphere of understanding. I think it's about thinking about your management and leadership capabilities, communication, not about the nuts and bolts of what that team is delivering. So yeah, I'd definitely be open to that.
And Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that Mark and Rachel said. I'm very happy to look at colleagues from other functions within universities, and strategy and planning is a curious function anyway, because it brings together, you know, people with finance backgrounds, market research backgrounds, HR, data analysis, sort of data science, IT type skills. So it really is a mishmash of a profession that sits within higher education. But the more generalist we can have, the more we can have those transferable skills spread across those functions, the better we will be able to adapt and change in light of major crises, or in terms of the actual change we need to go through as a sector. So I think there's, you know, all too often you can end up getting siloed, and I don't think that's where we should be. And I think that, you know, if it's an interesting job, it's something you like the look of, go and have a chat with whoever's the recruiting manager, see what the options are, whether it be as a common, whether it be a full-time post, whether it be another form of engagement if it's within a set university. So very encouraging for it.
Thank you. And that last point does remind me, when I was in the BBC, and I don't know if it's still true there, they had a very good system of attachments, I think it was called, where you could just, people would advertise experiential opportunities in other areas of the BBC, and you could just offer to go on attachment. Your salary didn't move, but you just went for a fixed period of a few months to really just taste a different area. And that is something that I'm quite keen to do more of in UCL. We do have a way to do that, but at the moment it's about how the backfill works, so that kind of detail. But I think there's appetite in the sector, certainly listening to colleagues on the panel, to do more of that, because I think we get more interesting outcomes. So we're almost out of time, and I just want to quickly ask each of the panel to maybe share in 30 seconds what their takeaway tips are from today, and what is the thing that you would like people who are watching today to remember most. So Paul, we're with you. Maybe I can start with you.
Thank you, Colette. For me, it's three things. One, first of all, higher education is very much an open sector for recruitment for colleagues from across other sectors. We need those skills and experience in order to be able to survive, thrive, and adapt into a new environment, and therefore that's really important. Transferable skills absolutely is something that we'll be looking to bring to the party, and really what Rachel was saying right at the start in terms of some of those things that can enhance sort of careers and being able to develop further. And the third is there's tremendous amount of variety within the sector, and I would thoroughly recommend that you find something if it looks interesting, and then just try out different things within the sector. You'll have an impact, you'll have a contribution, and you'll find it incredibly rewarding.
Thank you.
There's not much more to say.
Brilliant. Rachel, top tips.
So I think the key thing for me is to remember that universities are just large, complex businesses. They're very multifunctional. We work slightly differently in terms of the kinds of things you say. It's not profit driven in the same way, but we require very many of the same skills as other sectors. And we are large, complex businesses with a lot of exciting work going on. I think a key thing for me is don't be put off by the jargon. We're quite a jargony area, and I think in job descriptions and other things, if you don't understand something, I think as Paul said earlier, speak to the recruiting manager, get to the bottom of it. I think sometimes we get a bit lost in the language we use in HE, and that can put people off from outside the sector, but don't let it. We need talented people from any different area.
Thank you. That's a great point about the language. And Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, having come into higher education from outside, that adding to what Rachel said, people need to, or the sector perhaps needs to promote the fact it's not just about the teaching and research, that in terms of working in this environment, there are functions, the estates function, so the maintenance of buildings, there's the HR function and the human resource development and the administration of faculties, the marketing department. These are all places where you can do valuable work and really transfer your skills into. I think my main tip is really to reflect, if you're looking to work in higher education, is to reflect on the skills that you have and how they could be applied to a university.
Thank you, Mark. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was mindful we've got a minute to go. So I think those were really terrific points. I'm going to just give mine in one sentence because I can't possibly top what my panelists have said. I think they're absolutely right about the language and about understanding the sector. I think the question people watching this need to remember to ask themselves is, if you come into higher education, you will have influence. You won't have power in quite the same way as I had in the commercial world, and I love it. I get to work with brilliant people, and I get that exciting negotiations and tension, and we end up with something collaboratively. But that is something that is just different about the sector, and I think I'd say my takeaway is just ask yourself if you're up for that, and if you are, then hopefully we'll meet one day. So we're at time, and all I want to say is, if you're looking for more information after this seminar, it will be on the www.jobs.ac.uk/operations website, and a recording of this webinar will be available shortly on the website and on the jobs.ac.uk YouTube channel. So if you want to recap on something or share it with your network, please feel free to do so. And just behalf of jobs.ac.uk and my panelists, I'd like to thank everyone for their time today. Thank you for watching, and I hope we've answered some of your queries, and goodbye.